Welcome back, my friends. So we've got a new camera, a new mic, all new. Also, exciting news, Cal VPN's alpha is ready for you guys to go download. So in the description, there's a new website. You can go have a read. You can download it for free and use it only on Windows, this alpha. The Mac, the iOS apps are coming for the beta in about a month. But yeah, if you've got Windows, come use it for free. Free VPN. There's only one server as well. We need some stress testing done, so please come test it out. Tell me if it's working for you guys. If it's not working, if you find any bugs, if you have any recommendations, you leave a comment under any of my videos. I'll be able to filter through them. Just add CalVPN or something. So yeah, go check it out. This is the first post-quantum VPN in the world that you guys can use. So it's something brand new. Super pumped about this. It's just so exciting. So hopefully you guys get involved and let me know what you think. I'm coming back after watching this Kurzgesagt video just to say it was very depressing, okay? So instead of talking about heaps of science, I'll probably cut a lot of the science I've talked about out for this video and tell two stories I recalled from watching this video. Really fun, positive, happy stories, just because it's otherwise a very depressing video. And so make sure you stick around for those because they're two of my most favorite ever stories. They're Feynman's stories, Richard Feynman, and they're just utterly brilliant from Los Alamos. They're so much fun, so make sure you stick around for those. All right, what if we nuke a city? So we've already done a couple nuke videos by Kurzgesagt. What is it? What if you nuke the moon? And what if you drop a bomb at the bottom of the Marianas Trench? So I'll try not to just cover the same things we talked about in those videos. So you should definitely go watch those videos if you enjoy this sort of thing. I mean, I'm super fascinated by nukes. I love them. But maybe I shouldn't say that on the internet and put it on the internet. FBI might be at my door tomorrow. But anyway, yes, what if we nuke a city? Okay, let's watch. This is going to be kind of depressing. So maybe I'll try and think of some things that are a little bit more lighthearted, but I don't know how you do that with, a video about dropping a nuke on a city. Anyway, so, this with what's going on in the world as well, tensions are high. The risk of nuclear war is probably higher than they've been in quite a while. So this is a serious issue, and I don't know what to talk about, really. But anyway, I don't want to comment.
Playing around with nuclear weapons in videos is fun. There's a visceral joy in blowing things up and a horrifying fascination with things like fireballs, shockwaves, and radiation. And while it does help put our destructive power in perspective, it's not the best way of understanding the real impact of a nuclear explosion. This isn't about silly stacks of TNT or about how bright an explosion is. Nuclear weapons are about you. So we've partnered with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement to explore what would really happen if a nuclear weapon were detonated in a major city today. Not nuclear war, just one explosion. We begin our story in the middle of downtown in a major city. People are going to work, studying for exams, are lost in their thoughts and daily lives. Right here, a nuclear weapon is detonated and time freezes. The first phase of the explosion happens within less than a second. In a millisecond, a ball of plasma hotter than the sun appears and grows in a fireball to more than 2 kilometers across. Within this ball, everyone is just gone. Think of water dripped onto a very hot pan. A sizzle, and then there's nothing. Most buildings...
I just say that these visuals are extraordinary. Out of all the nuke videos, I think this one is just stunning.
Cars, trees, tacky sculptures, and people. All evaporated. First, the flash, an intense tsunami of light, washes over the city in an instant. If you happen to have your head pointed in the direction of the explosion, it renders you blind for a few hours. The heat of this light produces a thermal pulse, so energetic and hot that it just burns everything as far as 13 kilometers from the detonation site. What this means is that everything in an area of 500 square kilometers that is able to burn starts burning. Plastic, wood, fabric, hair, and skin. If you happen to be in reach of the thermal pulse, one moment you're on your way to work, the next moment you're on fire. Now the second phase begins. It happens in a few seconds. Most people will now first notice that something is wrong, but it's already too late for hundreds of thousands. The flash is followed by the shockwave. The heat and radiation of the fireball create a bubble of superheated and supercompressed air around it that's now expanding explosively, faster than the speed of sound, creating winds stronger than hurricanes and tornadoes. Human infrastructure is no match for its power. Most major buildings within a kilometer of the fireball are just ground up down to their base. Only steel-reinforced concrete is able to partially resist the pressure. In the surrounding parks where retirees feed the ducks, trees blackened and smouldering from the heat a second before snap like toothpicks. If you're outside, you get tossed away like a grain of dust in a tornado. The shock wave weakens as it travels outwards, but still, about 175 square kilometers of houses collapse like they're made of cards, trapping tens of thousands of people who didn't have any time to react. Gas stations explode and fires spread throughout the rubble. A mushroom cloud made from the remains of the fireball, dust and ash rises kilometers into the sky in the next few minutes and casts a dark shadow over the ruined city. This violently pulls in fresh...
All right, so yeah, this is a lot of fun. I just thought of, though, a couple really fun stories. This is actually because of nukes, right? I thought, oh, you know, those Feynman stories. Richard Feynman, you know, Nobel Prize winner in America, brilliant guy, but he's famous for his storytelling, and he has these brilliant stories from his time at Los Alamos where they built the atomic bomb, right? And he was, you know, pretty pivotal in that. But you got to keep, you know, the context of this situation was that he was still a PhD student at the time, like what I am, right? So he was a nobody. He wasn't important then, you know, he was no Oppenheimer at Los Alamos, okay? So let me tell you two stories. I can remember these two, and they're absolutely brilliant, hilarious, and fun. And I think it'll be nice to, rather than just talking about science in this one, because we've already done 2 Nuke videos explaining the science, so go watch those. I will tell you 2 fun stories, Feynman stories, because this video is very dark. This story will lighten it up for you. So I'll probably just tell them now, and I'll put the other one further into the video, okay? They're both incredible. 2 of my favorite ever stories, and the ends of them are just great. So make sure you listen to all of it. So let me tell you this one Feynman story. It's really incredible and funny, so stick around. One has to do with the safety of the plant at Oak Ridge. Los Alamos was making the bomb. Oak Ridge, they were trying to separate the isotopes of uranium-238 and uranium-236, the later of which, 235, sorry, which is the explosive one. So they were just beginning to get infinitesimal amounts from an experimental thing, dubbed the 235. And at the same time, they were practicing, you know, there was this big plan. They were going to have vats of things and chemicals everywhere, and purify stuff and repurify and get ready for the next stage after purified, several stages, right? So they were practicing the chemistry on one hand, and they were just getting a little bit, you know, from one of the pieces of the apparatus. And they were trying to learn how to assay it to determine how much uranium-235 was in it. And the Los Alamos team, Richard Feynman, would send them instructions, right? And they never got it right. So finally, Mr. Gray said, the only way to get it right is to go down there to see what they're doing, to understand why the assay is wrong. At the time, the Army people said no, apparently. You know, there was a policy to keep all the information, you know, Los Alamos in one place, and the people at Oak Ridge could not know what it was used for. They had no idea what they were doing. You know, the higher-ups knew they were separating uranium, but they had no idea it was for a bomb or how anything worked. They were just very confused, and the people underneath didn't know anything. And the Army wanted to keep it that way, so there was no information going back and forth. But this Mr. Gray finally insisted that it was important enough, you know, you'll never get the assays right, it'll go up in smoke. So this Mr. Gray went down to see what they were doing, right? And as he was walking through, he saw them wheeling a tank, you know, of water, green water. And green water is uranium nitrate, right? And he said, you're going to handle it like that when it's purified too? And they said, sure, why not? Well, won't it explode, he said. And they're like, huh, explode? And so the Army said, you see, we shouldn't let any information go across. So it turned out, right, that the Army realized that how much stuff we needed to make a bomb, you know, 40 kilograms or whatever it was. And they realized that that much of purified would never be in the plant. So there was no danger. But they didn't know that the neutrons are enormously more effective when they're slowed down in water. And so in water, it takes, you know, less than a tenth, no, 100th, 20, very much less material. And you make a reaction that makes radioactivity. You know, it's not the explosion, it's radioactivity that kills people around them, right? So it was very dangerous. And they had not paid any attention to safety at all. So a telegram goes from Oppenheimer to Mr. Gray, goes through the entire plant, find out where all the concentrations are, with the process as they've designed it, right? And the Los Alamos were going to calculate in the meantime how much material could come together before there's an explosion. And so two groups started working on it. This Christie's group were working on water solutions. Feynman's group were working on dry powder in water boxes. And they calculated, about how much material. And so this Christie's group was going to go down and tell them at Oak Ridge what the situation was, the whole thing, right? And they have to go down, the whole thing was broken down. And so Feynman happily gives all the numbers to this Christie, and here's all the stuff, go. Christie got ammonia, so Feynman had to go on an airplane, right? They strapped the secrets to this little thing with a belt on his back. And the airplane in those days were like buses, right? You'd stop off every once in a while, except, stations are further apart. So they stop off somewhere and there's a guy standing next to Feynman with the chains swinging. He says something like, it must be terribly difficult to fly without a priority on airplanes these days. Feynman couldn't resist and he says, well, I don't know, I have a priority. And then a little bit later, this guy says, it looks like some generals are coming. They're going to pull out some of us number 3s. And Feynman says, that's right, I'm a number 2. He probably wrote to his congressman, if he wasn't a congressman himself, saying, what are they doing sending these little kids around with number 2 priorities in the middle of war? Anyway, he arrives there, right? And the first thing he does is have them take him through the plan. He said nothing. He just looked, at everything, and he found out the situation was even worse than Mr. Gray reported because he was confused. He noticed certain boxes in big lots, and he didn't notice, more boxes in other rooms, and it was the same room on the other side. Things like that. Too much stuff together, and it goes up, right? So it was bad. And so Feynman went through the entire plan, right? And he claims he has a very bad memory, but he claims he has a very good short-term memory. So he could remember all kinds of crazy things like building 9207 and VAT number, so forth, right? So he went home at night, he went through the whole thing explaining where all the dangers were and what you'd have to do to fix it. Pretty easy. You put cadmium in the solutions to absorb the neutrons in the water. You separate the boxes so that they're not too dense, not too much uranium together and so on. And all these rules. So he wrote down all these examples and how it worked, right? And you couldn't make the plan safe unless you knew how it worked, you see. So Oppenheimer said to Feynman before he left, now when you go, they're following people out that are technically able down at Oak Ridge, Mr. Julian, whatever, and so forth, right? And I want you to make sure that these people are at the meeting and that you tell them that the safety, so they really understand what they're in charge of. And Feynman says, suppose they're not at the meeting, what am I supposed to do? And he says, well, Los Alamos cannot accept the responsibility for the safety of the Oak Ridge plant unless... And Feynman says, you mean me, little Richard's going to go down there? And he said, yes, little Richard, you go and do that. And you have to understand, Feynman at this point was just a postgrad student. He was literally in my position, a PhD student. He hadn't graduated his PhD. And so the next day, so all these people, all the big shots at, in this meeting, all the generals, all the scientists, right? And a huge meeting. And about this very serious problem, the safety of the plant, it would never work. It would have blown up. Feynman swears by this, right? And then, here's little Richard. There was also this lieutenant who was taking care of Feynman. He was telling him that you shouldn't, tell them how the neutrons work and all the details, and you should keep it separate. Just tell them what to do to keep them safe. Feynman said, in my opinion, it's not possible for them to do that if they don't understand the rules, unless they understand how it works, right? And so it's his opinion. It's only going to work if he tells them. And so, Los Alamos cannot accept the responsibility for the safety of the Oak Ridge plant unless they're fully informed, and blah, blah, blah. It was great, apparently. And so he goes to the colonel and he says to the colonel, just 5 minutes. So he goes to the window and he starts to think. He just stops. So he looks 5 minutes. He says, all right, Mr. Feynman, you go ahead. So Feynman sits down. He tells him all about neutrons, how they work, blah, 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 blah. Too many neutrons together. You got to keep the material apart. Cadmium absorption slows, blah, 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 blah. So all stuff which was elementary, at Los Alamos. But they'd never heard of it down at Oak Ridge. And so he turned out to be a tremendous genius to them. He was like a god coming down from the sky at Oak Ridge. All these phenomena that they had no idea what was going on, they'd never heard of about, Feynman knew all about it, all these numbers. So by being rather primitive back at Los Alamos, Feynman was a super genius at the other end. At least these are his words, right? And so the result was that they made, these own little groups to make their own calculations to learn how to do it. They started to redesign how to do it all. The construction designers, the engineers, the chemical engineers. They were going to, create this new plant that was going to handle material, right? And so Feynman goes away again, and they tell him to come back in 2 months. And they're going to redesign the plant. So he comes back in a month or so, right? And he's talking to all the engineers, and he's got to look at the plant, But how do you look at a plant that hasn't been built yet? I mean, he didn't know, apparently. So he goes into this room with these people, and there's always a lieutenant, that was always coming around with firemen, taking care of him. He had to have an escort everywhere. And so he goes with, firemen. He takes him to this room. There were these two engineers, right? This huge long table, and it's got this huge blueprint on it, just as big as the table, not just one, but a stack of them, right? Massive. And so he had no idea what any of this meant. He had no idea what was on the blueprints. And so they started to explain it to Fireman because they thought he was a genius, right? And they start out, Mr. Fireman, we'd like you to understand that the plants are so designed that, you see, one of the things that we had to avoid was accumulation, like problems like there's an evaporator work, which trying to accumulate stuff, if the valve gets stuck or something like that and accumulates too much stuff, then it'll explode. So they explained to Fireman that this plan was designed that so no one valve, if any one valve gets stuck, nothing would happen. It needs at least two valves everywhere, right? And so then they explained to him how it works. And the carbon go, right, comes in here, the nitrate comes up here, up and down, across, up, down, up through this valve, blah, 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 right? Up, down, up, down, up. Very fast talking, apparently. Very complicated chemical plant, and Fireman is completely dazed. Worse, he doesn't even know what the symbols on the blueprint mean. There's some kind of thing that at first he thinks it's a window, right? It's a square with a little cross in the middle. And all over the damn thing, lines of this damn square, he thinks it's a window. No, it can't be a window because it aren't always at the edge. So he wants to ask him what it is. You must have been in a situation, right? If you don't ask him right away it would have been okay. But they've been talking a little bit too long, and you hesitated too long, and you ask him now, they're going to think, why are you wasting my time for all this time? So he's thinking to himself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? He has an idea. Maybe it's a valve. And so in order to find out whether it's a valve or not, he takes his finger, he puts it down in the middle of one of these blueprints in page number, what happens if this valve gets stuck? Figuring they're going to say, that's not a valve, that's a window. And so one looks at the other, and if that valve gets stuck and it goes up and down and blah, 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 and they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and they're looking at each other, chip, 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 and they turn around to Fireman and goes, you're absolutely right, sir. Just by sheer luck. So they roll up the blueprint and away they went, and they walked out. And the lieutenant, who's been following him all the way through, says, you're a genius, he said. I got the idea you're a genius when you went to the plant once and you could tell them about the evaporator C121 and blah, 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 so forth, and how it would explode, right? And he says, but when you knew about all the neutrons, you were a genius. But what you just did was so fantastic. I want to know how. How do you do something like that? And he tells them, you try to find out whether it's a valve or not. We'll go back to the video now and I'll tell you the second story in a minute.
Share surrounding the city, destroying more buildings and providing an abundance of oxygen. It depends on the city what happens next. If there's enough fuel, fires may turn into a firestorm that burns the rubble, everybody trapped in it, and people trying to flee the devastation. Up to 21 kilometers from the explosion, people just like you rush to their windows to take pictures of the mushroom cloud, unaware that the shockwave is still coming at them, about to shatter their windows and create a blizzard of sharp glass.
Yeah, it's moving faster than sound. The glass is just going to break and smash into your eyes, and you won't even realize anything's happening.
Third phase begins in the coming hour.
I mean, you'll see it, but obviously when glass breaks, you're not going to have much time to move and cover your
days. We're used to the idea that help will come no matter faster. This time is different. A nuclear explosion is like every natural disaster at once. Or millions of people with serious injuries, lacerations, broken bones, serious burns. In the next few minutes and hours, thousands more will die because of these injuries. Countless people are trapped in collapsed buildings like in earthquakes, or blinded by the flash, deaf from the blast wave, and unable to flee through streets impassable with rubble and debris. They're terrified, confused, and don't know what's happened to them or why. Most likely, many hospitals have been leveled along with all the other buildings, and most medical professionals are either dead or injured along with everyone else. The survivors lucky enough...
So with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment, something like this really could be on the horizon. Things are getting worse and worse for Russia, and I'm worried that, Putin's going to be forced into a corner and retaliate. I thought, maybe he would drop a nuke in the ocean off, the coast, just as like a show of power, so they yield, but who knows. Anyway, let's keep watching.
To have been in metro tunnels or standing in the right place to be unburned and unhurt won't have truly escaped harm yet. Depending on the type of weapon, where it explodes, and even the weather, an awful black rain can begin, with radioactive ash and dust descending on the city, covering everything and everyone. The invisible, malicious, silent horror of radiation takes its turn. Every breath carries poison to the lungs of the survivors. Over the coming days,
this is the worst part for people. You know, you're lucky if you got killed in the blast. This part would be horrific.
The people who receive the highest doses of radiation exposure will die. There will be no help, not for hours or maybe even days. Civilization doesn't operate when there is a total breakdown of infrastructure. Roads are blocked.
If you want a pretty good depiction of what it would be like for survivors in this sort of situation, that TV show that came out, was it last year or the year before, Chernobyl, was brilliant. You know, I think it was American made, but it was really, really, really good. I have Russian friends as well, and they all actually really enjoyed it. They don't usually enjoy, you know, depictions of Russia from America, but they thought it was actually really well done. And the depiction of the physics, there's not much, but like there's physicists and they talk about it. And what happens to the survivors, it's horrific. But, you know, things like this are good. Videos like this are good, so we can share them to people like Putin. And see, let's not do this. Why would you ever want to do this to another human? You know, it's just insane.
Train tracks warped, runways cluttered with rubble. No water, no electricity, no communication, no stores to replenish supplies from. Help from surrounding cities will have a hard time entering the disaster zone, and even if they can, the radioactive contamination will make it risky to get too close. After a nuclear attack, you're on your own. So, bit by bit, people emerge from the rubble, on foot, contaminated with radioactive fallout, carrying what little they may have left. They are slow, in pain, traumatized, and they all need food, water, and medical treatment fast. And the damage done by a nuclear weapon doesn't end when the fires burn out and the smoke clears. The hospitals in the neighboring cities are under-equipped for a disaster of this scale and overwhelmed with tens or hundreds of thousands of patients with serious injuries. In the weeks, months, and years to come, many of those who survived will succumb to cancers like leukemia. The reason no government wants you to think about all this is because there is no serious humanitarian response possible to a nuclear explosion. There's no way to really help the immediate victims of a nuclear attack. This is not a hurricane, wildfire, or earthquake, or nuclear accident. It is all of these things at once, but worse. No nation on Earth is prepared to deal with it. The world has changed in the past few years, with world leaders again explicitly and publicly threatening each other with nuclear weapons. Many experts think the danger of a nuclear strike is higher than it has been in decades. Governments tell their citizens that it's good that we have nuclear weapons, but it's bad when anyone else gets them. That it's somehow necessary to threaten others with mass destruction to keep us safe. But does this make you feel safe? It only takes a small group of people with power to go crazy or rogue, a small misstep or a simple misunderstanding to unleash a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Exploding stuff in videos is fun. Exploding things in real life, not so much. There is a solution though. Eliminating all nuclear weapons and vowing never to build them again. In 2017, almost 2/3 of all the world's countries, supported by hundreds of civil society organizations and the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, agreed to prohibit and eliminate nuclear weapons. It's not about who has nuclear weapons and who doesn't. The weapons themselves are the problem. They are deeply immoral and an existential threat to all of us. No matter what country you come from, no matter what political side you find yourself on, we need to demand that they disappear forever. This will not happen without pressure. If you want to be part of this pressure, there are things you personally can do too. Visit notonukes.org to learn more about.
That'll do for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think down under. Don't forget to go try Cal out. I'll catch you next time.